Hello and welcome to Tech Deals, part 2 of the $4,000 Ultimate No Compromised System Build video series. If you haven't watched part 1, it will be linked in the video description below. By all means, check that out first. Part 1 is a short and sweet summary of all the parts I've included and the plan for this video series. This video is a more behind-the-scenes look at my thought process, my thinking, my decision-making process. Why did I choose these parts? What purpose do they serve? Why am I building this machine? And what might you change to suit your own needs? This will be a longer video. If you look at the length of the video below and you see how long it is, don't freak out. This is meant to be more of a vlog style video. I'm going to be thinking out loud, so to speak. I want you to understand the why behind all of this, not just the what. The first video was the what. This is the why. The third video, and if you decide you don't want to watch all of this, or maybe you don't want to watch any of it, that's okay. Video number 3, linked in the description below, will be the build. The camera will be overhead. I'll have everything laid out. I will go step by step on the build of this computer. The step-by-step video is designed to be clear enough, detailed enough, that if you were to buy these components or similar components, they don't have to be exact, and you wanted to put it together yourself, you could follow along and build it even if you've never built a computer before. So that video will be fairly long and detailed as well. The fourth video, I'll put the computer back on the desk, we'll install Windows and set everything up, drivers, applications, everything. After that comes Windows performance. I will do game performance videos, and most importantly, for the first time on my channel, I will do 3D rendering and video editing and video rendering benchmarks. I will also do SSD performance comparisons because I do have a variety of SSDs here. I will also talk about Windows storage spaces and data archive and backup, and a variety of other videos as well. So check those out. They'll be coming up soon. Now, why did I pick these parts? If you're still here and you're still interested in this video, great. Sit back, relax, because I'm going to be talking for a while. Why am I building this machine? Short background. My personal computer at home is 3 years old. I built it intending it to last 5 years, and it absolutely could do that. I don't have to build this. I could keep that machine. It works great. The thing that changed, that stimulated the build of this, is my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is now a little over 6 months old. I started it in February of 2016, and I'm now doing a lot more video editing and rendering than I ever did. I never did a lot before, but now I'm doing every day, basically. So the extra power of these components will help me get my work done more efficiently. I'm doing more multitasking than I used to. And I actually have a use for my existing machine, so I'm not taking it apart, it's staying, but I'm going to move it to another desk in my house and use it for something else. So it's time to build a new Ultimate machine. It is my intention for this one to last 5 years. We'll see how that goes. You can never predict the future. But I generally try to keep my computers 5 years. That's how you get your value out of them, because they depreciate over time, and once you've had them a couple years, the cost to keep them a few more isn't that high. Let me quickly tell you what's in my machine at home now. I have an Intel i7 4770K. That is the original Haswell, not the Devil's Canyon refresh release, but that's the original Haswell release chip that came out 3 years ago. It's installed on an ASUS Z87 Pro, not a 97, but an 87 Pro. It's an original Haswell release. I love that motherboard. It has worked wonderfully for me. I have no complaints or issues with it, which is why I have so many ASUS motherboards on my channel. They, knock on wood, work very well. I have 32 gigabytes of system RAM installed. It is DDR3 2400 megahertz RAM. It works great. I do use that RAM. There's a reason why it's in there. I've got a variety of storage drives. Briefly, my main boot drive is a Samsung 840 EVO. It works great, especially after the BIOS fix, after the firmware fixes were done to it. It had a couple of teething issues when it was launched, but in the past year or so, it has been a great drive. I have a second SSD as well for applications, programs, and games, and I have a variety of hard drives, both internal and external as well. Graphics card. I've actually had several graphics cards in that computer. The most recent graphics card was a NVIDIA GeForce GTX 980 Ti, which was in there for about a year. I recently replaced the 980 Ti with a 1080. Why? 4K gaming. The 980 Ti wasn't quite cutting it. No, a 1080 isn't that much faster than a 980 Ti, but the extra 2 gigabytes of VRAM, the extra performance at 4K really makes it worth it. It really does. I don't regret switching from the 980 Ti to the 1080, and if you sell your 980 Ti, frankly, and which I did, I ended up selling it for $380 after fees and shipping. Not bad, considering the depreciation they suffer when a new card comes out. It works just fine. Interestingly enough, my current computer at home is installed in the same case as this, the Corsair Obsidian 750D. Why? I love this case. I have 3 of them. This case is my favorite full tower case. For $130, it is an incredible value. There are other cases. Absolutely, you may think $130 for a case, that sounds expensive. Full tower. Price full towers. Now mid towers, yes, that's a lot of money for a mid tower. If you get something smaller, you can spend less. But if you're installing this much hardware and you want a machine that is silent, and silence requires big slow fans and lots of airflow, and it's easy to work in, $130 buys you a very quality case. It's not just big, it's quality. The metal is good quality, it's powder coated inside and out. It's a joy to work in. I love it very much. It's my third, I've got 2 other of these already with systems built in it, so it's a great, great case. Now, why did I go, let's talk about CPU for a minute. Why the i7, now that's my existing machine, and it's the multitasking and video rendering that's causing me to upgrade. Why the i7 6800K? That is a great question. There are many CPUs I could pick from. For example, some people may say, well, if you're doing so much video rendering, why not get one of the higher level enthusiast chips? Why not get the i7 6900K, which is the 8-core chip, or the i7 6950X, which is the 10-core chip? The short answer is they're terrible values, and frankly, unless you won the lottery last week, nobody should buy them. Really, they're terrible values. The additional performance they provide does not in any way justify their price tag. They're terrible values. This processor is $430. It has 6 cores and 12 threads. To go to an 8-core chip is $600 more. You can buy 2 of these for less than the price of an 8-core chip. Yes, I know you cannot install 2 of these in one system, but $600 for 2 cores? You can build a whole computer for $600. You can almost buy 2 computers for that. That's just ridiculous. I'm sorry, Intel, but that's outrageous pricing. Note, 25% more cores does not provide you with 25% more speed. 6 to 8 cores is a 25% core jump. But except in very, very limited circumstances, you're not going to see a 25% performance increase. You'll see anywhere from 0 to 15 to 20% depending on what you're doing. For $600, that's just nuts. I'm sorry. I mean, that's a whole other GTX 1080, for example. The i7 6950X is even more ridiculous. That is $700 more for 2 more cores, except now it's 20% more cores instead of 25%. Jumping from 6 to 8 is 25%. Jumping from 8 to 10 is 20%. Now you're spending $700 to get 20% more cores that will really give you 10 to 15% more real-world performance in applications that will use the core, such as video rendering and 3D rendering, and that's about it. It is true that if you're running a lot of virtual machines, it does help there, but that's a kind of a side use case. I did not mention the i7 6850K, and I know somebody's going to say, but that's only $200 more. Get that one. For $200, what do you get? Let's think about this for a minute. This is a 6-core, 12-thread chip. The i7 6850K is a 6-core, 12-thread chip. There is only one difference. This supports 28 PCI Express lanes. The i7 6850K supports 40. That's 12 more. Now, in my previous coverage of this processor and this motherboard, many people have said, yeah, but you want to be future-proofed. I want to put in 2 graphics cards. You need those extra PCI Express lanes. You want to put all the storage in. You want to use stuff. You need them. No, you don't. That's ridiculous. Okay, let me give you a simple example. The chip down from this, the i7 6700K, the 4-core, 8-thread chip for 330. It gets installed in a Z170 motherboard that has 16 PCI Express lanes. Yes, I know there's 4 more going to the chipset, but basically you have 16 PCI Express lanes. This has 28. 16 is actually enough for most people. 28 is almost overkill, although with all the stuff I'm going to have installed, with all the SSDs, with all the input and output I'm going to be doing, the 28 actually will help. The 40 would make no difference whatsoever. If I were to replace this with an i7 6850K, it would make 0 difference to the performance of this machine. None whatsoever. The extra PCI Express lanes are needed in servers and workstations that handle either multiple users or a lot of virtual machines or a lot of concurrent operations. Yes, there is a use for 40 PCI Express lanes. But if you genuinely need 40 PCI Express lanes, you shouldn't be on this. You should be on Xenon, their server and workstation platform. And if you have that much concurrent work going on, if you have a server that hosts multiple users, or you have a workstation machine that is doing endless rendering or running 10 virtual machines, not only should you have the 40 PCI Express lanes, which I would agree with, but you should also have a lot more than 6 cores. For the price of the 10-core chip, for about $1,700, you can get 2 of the 10-core Xenon chips. They're about $680 on Amazon. I'm not going to buy one. I'm not going to review one. It's outside the scope of my channel. But if I needed a machine like that, I would be looking at 2 of the 10-core. They're 2.2 gigahertz, turboing to 3.1. For $680, it's a 10-core chip. Now, wait a minute, you say, 10 cores for $680, why not just buy one of those? Because you can't overclock it. This you can overclock into the 4+ gigahertz range, but you cannot overclock the Xenons, so you're stuck at 3.1 max. 3.1 max isn't enough if you're going to be gaming. Well, I mean, it is, but this is the wrong choice if you're going to be gaming. You don't want a Xenon if you're gaming. But with 2 of those chips and a dual socket motherboard, not this one, but an ASUS dual socket motherboard, $1,700, I'll put the model numbers in the part up here, buys you 20 cores, 40 threads at up to 3.1 gigahertz. And it buys you a motherboard that supports anywhere between 0.5 terabyte and 1.5 terabytes of RAM and ECC RAM and workstation level features. If you need 40 PCI Express lanes, you need that kind of platform. For $1,700, you get 20 cores, 40 threads at 3.1 gigahertz with real workstation motherboards. I don't need that. Neither do you unless you're building a server or a serious professional workstation, which is way outside the scope. Anyway, that's why this is here. And no, please don't waste your $200 on the i7 6850K. You're spending $200 on 12 PCI Express lanes you won't use. That's the reason for the CPU. Now, somebody is bound to say, I will say one more thing about that. Somebody is bound to say, but if you want to game, and yes, I will be gaming on this machine. I'll be playing everything from Grand Theft Auto 5 to Witcher 3 to Fallout 4, take your pick. Wouldn't the i7 6700K be both A, less expensive, and B, faster? Yes, it would be less expensive, but not by enough to matter, and B, no, it would not be faster. I am fully aware that there are a very small handful of games that the higher clock speed and the newer design, the refresh design of Skylake on an i7 6700K would be slightly faster than the Broadwell-E platform they're not going to be enough of a difference you'll ever notice. We're talking about minor trivial differences. To be blunt, if all you want to do is game, you shouldn't buy either i7. Frankly, an i5 6500 non-overclocked is all you need to play Grand Theft Auto 5, Fallout 4, Witcher 3. Most games, if you want to play Overwatch and The Division, you don't need any of the i7s. So whenever somebody says, yeah, but get the i7 6700K because it's the best gaming chip out there. Yeah, I suppose. How much money are you spending to get 3 frames per second more? It really is a minor difference. Now, I covered those differences in my Broadwell versus Skylake video. I'm not going to rehash that anymore. But in short, if you're going to an i7, go to a 6800K. Looking back on it, when I bought my original Haswell, I should have gotten Ivy Bridge G. If I had gotten Ivy Bridge G, I probably wouldn't be doing this. It would have carried me through if I had just gone ahead and gotten the Enthusiast back then. So, if you're planning on buying an i7, 6800K for most people is what I would recommend. So, motherboard. Let's talk about the motherboard for a minute. Now, if I stick this here, you can't see me, so I won't. But why the X99A2? Because for $230, you get a very long list of features for a modest price. I say modest, $230. Keep in mind that a similar motherboard in a Z170 chipset with the similar features is going to be $150. The Z170A from ASUS is $150. So this is $80 more, but you get all the high-end features. Quad channel RAM, the support for the high-end sockets, more ports, more serial ATA ports. It's got more of everything. Why not get a higher end board, you ask? What about like the Deluxe or the Rampage 5? Those are expensive for what they offer. They're really expensive for what they offer. There's nothing wrong with them. Again, if you won the lottery last night, okay, go buy the Deluxe or the Rampage or the $500 motherboards. But for double the money, what do you get? Wi-Fi. Well, you can add Wi-Fi for $20 to any motherboard. What else do you get? A couple more ports and a couple of whiz-bang features and maybe slightly better RGB lighting. Really? That's so minor as to be insignificant. Now, there is one board you might want to consider. If you don't like the black and white color scheme of this board, that's fine. For about $70, $80 more, the X99 Strix board from ASUS has better RGB lighting than this does. This does have RGB lighting, but it's limited. It's very limited RGB lighting, and it's a black-white color scheme. If you like the Republic of Gamers Strix line, for just a little bit more than this, it has better RGB lighting and a couple of other minor features and a different color scheme on the board. And if it's your preference, if you're trying to match it, for example, if instead of EVGA, you're buying an ASUS Republic of Gamers 1080 Strix card, okay, you can spend the extra $70 and get the Strix version of it. I don't have an issue with that. I don't care about the lighting, to be completely honest with you. So I'm going to frankly leave this card in white. This has full RGB lighting. This will do the full 16.7 million colors. I'm going to leave it in white. I just don't care. Some people care about it, some people don't. I'm going to leave this motherboard in white. I'm not changing it. But if you care, the Strix version of this, the ROG, that's fine. Because it's like 310, 320. It's not too much more. Great motherboard. What about other brands? What about MSI, Gigabyte, etc.? I have no problems with MSI. Would I buy an MSI motherboard? Absolutely. I just have so much good experience with ASUS, I'm reluctant to leave them. When the next generation, when Kaby Lake comes out, I'll do a couple of other brands because I've done so many ASUS on my channel. But for my personal machine, only ASUS is going in my personal machine. So, liquid coolers. Let's talk about liquid coolers for a minute. Why are we putting in the H115i cooler? I have 2 computers at home that currently have liquid coolers. Both of my i7s at home, I've got my original i7 4770K and my newer machine, which is a i7 4790K. Both of them have Corsair H90 140 millimeter liquid coolers. They work perfectly. Both machines run overclocked very well. In fact, I didn't mention this earlier, my i7 4770K, the original Haswell, had a standard clock speed of 3.5 gigahertz. The refresh, the 90, is 4. I run my 4770K at 4.4 gigahertz all day long for years. No issues, no complaints. It's stable. No voltage bump at all. Liquid cooling. The machine is relatively quiet. The fan speed does spin up when the CPU is under 100% load. The fan's on my liquid cooler. When the CPU is not at 100% load, the fan is completely silent. So it's plugged into the port on the board where the fan speed is controlled by the motherboard. So when my system is not busy, totally silent. When it is busy, yes, the fan spins up. When I'm rendering a video, for example, yes, the fan does kick on. I'm going with the Corsair H115i because it, being a 280 millimeter cooler, is going to provide more cooling than the single fan, single radiator coolers I have now, and I'm going to try and get as much out of this as I can. I'm pretty sure I can comfortably get 4.2 gigahertz out of this chip. I'm hoping to get 4.4. I will be doing live overclocking. I've never done overclocking on my channel before. I will be doing here with a monitor in front of you. I'm going to be doing both the automatic overclocking where you click a button and you let it do its thing, and I'll be doing manual overclocking where I go into the BIOS and I talk to you about the various settings and we try different things and we'll see what works and what doesn't. In this case, with that cooler on this motherboard, at some point in the future, those will end up linked below. Now, if you end up picking a different case, this case supports 140 millimeter fans and 2 of them on the top with the 280 millimeter cooler. The H100i is exactly the same thing, but in 240 millimeter or a pair of 120s. So if by chance you end up with a different case that doesn't support 140 millimeter fans, the H100 is really close, almost the same thing. The other nice thing about the H100 and the H115i, as opposed to the H90, which I have at home, is Corsair Link. This has the ability to plug in to the motherboard. It uses one of the USB 2 headers on the board, which I'm not planning on using anyway, and software gets installed in Windows, which I will show in a video at some point. And you can monitor temperature and the fact that it's working in the fans, and you can control all that from within the system. So that's a nice feature. That's what the I on there means. It means it has Corsair's Link interface. As a side note, that's what the I on the power supply means as well. That's what this cable is the power supply also has Corsair Link and also plugs into a USB 2.0 header on the motherboard. This board has 2 USB 2 headers, one for the cooler, one for the power supply. Fun stuff. Yes, I'll be showing every single feature of this in a video. Don't worry. Now, other coolers. Now, there are other brands besides Corsair. Here's the biggest argument I'll make for Corsair. Here's my thought process behind it. Go look at it on Amazon. Go look at this cooler. Links in below. Everything here is linked below. Look at the reviews on Amazon. Look how many thousands, and I mean thousands, of reviews that all the various Corsair products have. Now look at how many 5- and 4-star reviews they have versus 1-star. That's all I need to hear. Really. Keep in mind, first of all, generally, angry people complain. Happy people use their product and say nothing. It takes maybe a dozen or more happy people to find one to leave a happy review. You might only need 1 or 2 unhappy people for them to leave a complaint. So for there to be 1,000 plus 5-star reviews and only a handful of negative reviews means there are tens of thousands of very happy people and only a relatively handful of unhappy people. That being said, has anybody ever had one of these leak, break, or damage their machine? Yes, I have no doubt that that's totally true. You cannot sell tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of liquid coolers and not have one of them burst. It's going to happen. Corsair is a large, reputable company, and while it is not, let me be clear on this, It is not explicitly written in their warranty, because if it was, they would be legally obligated to do it. I can tell you from having done this for a while, they handle problems on a case-by-case basis. If that actually leaks in your system and ruins your graphics card, for example, and you present it to them in such a way that doesn't sound like you're trying to get a free graphics card, they'll replace your graphics card. They've done it before, and you can find that in multiple instances on various forums around the web where somebody said, hey, Corsair, my system's been damaged. I'll send you the broken card. I mean, the liquid dripped on my card, it broke. And Corsair's replaced their video card or replaced their CPU if it got damaged by a leaking system. It's just not written into the warranty, because then it becomes a legal obligation. Essentially, they don't want to be abused. But if you respect them and you say, look, man, you can have all the broken stuff, I'll take pictures, I'll ship the whole thing to you if you want, they'll replace your damaged computer. They'll fix it, because they have an interest in their reputation. Corsair makes this case. It makes their coolers. Corsair sells RAM. Corsair sells SSDs. I don't have one here, but they do. Corsair is a big company that sells a lot of different products. The power supply, they want to take care of you. If you are reasonable with them and you have a problem with their coolers, they'll take care of you. I feel comfortable saying that. There are other cooler brands on the market. I don't have anything negative to say about them. I have no experience with them. It's difficult to make recommendations and comments about things I have no experience with. And I'm not going to make judgments based on just what I read on forums. I have 2 Corsair liquid coolers at home, one of which I've used for 3 years now. It's been running in my machine 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, most of the time. It's been off a few times. For 3 years, I've had no problems. I haven't used any other coolers, any other liquid coolers. So you can certainly go with another brand, but I do believe they're number one in the business, and for that reason, I would stick with Corsair. Air coolers. I find no reason to put an air cooler in 2016 in a system of this caliber. I know people say, yes, but Cooler Master sells really nice, big, fancy coolers, and the NH15 or whatever the thing's called, the big $90+ cooler that's like this big, it literally is monster. Yes, it's true that other websites and other channels have done reviews of the big monster air coolers against some of the liquid coolers and actually have gotten similar results. However, look how big that is and try to install it. It's hard to fit in. In fact, that big NH15, and I hope I'm saying that right, it'll be up here, whatever it is, the big one that's like $90, the air cooler, Linus Tech Tips reviewed that cooler. And they put it into a motherboard and it blocked 2 of the RAM slots. They had to take the cooler off to access the RAM slots, and when they put it on, the RAM they put in was too tall. Why would you put up with that? The radiator and fans are on the top of the system. The only thing installed on the CPU itself is just the water block. You have full access to everything and good airflow. Furthermore, here's the other thing. Most of the websites you'll go to, most of the other channels that review air coolers and liquid coolers, test them on open test benches. I don't do that, and I'm not going to do that, and here's why. Airflow on an open test bench in an air-conditioned room with fans and whatnot is not a realistic depiction of what happens in a case. When you put an air cooler in a case, even a really good one, and there's fans on it, all you're doing is pulling the heat out of the CPU and then blowing it around inside your case. You then need additional fans to blow the heat out of your case. A liquid cooler never puts the heat in your case in the first place. The radiator on this will be installed on the top, with the fans blowing the heat out. The liquid and the cables take the heat directly off of the CPU, run it straight up to the radiator, and expels it. The heat is never in the case. So when you look at liquid versus air, look and see whether it was an open test bench or whether they put it into a case and put the cover on. How much air cooling does the case have? If they just put it here on the desk and there's an air conditioning vent directly overhead blowing air on it, that doesn't really mean much to you building a computer now, does it? Liquid cooling, seriously. This is $125. It's $30 more expensive than the big, huge air cooler. And in a case, I believe it provides better performance. So, what else is here? Power supply. Why in the world do I have an AX1200i power supply? That is a $310 power supply. That's nuts. Yes, it is, and I don't recommend any of you buy it. There is no application within reason that you should have a 1200 watt power supply. Why do I have it? I bought it refurbished. I got this for $170. I wish I could say, go click the link below and get that deal yourself. Unfortunately, it's not one of those deals that's available all the time. It will be linked below. Go look on Amazon and see if they are selling them refurbished. But I bought this off of Amazon for $170, Corsair factory refurbished. It came with the little bag. All the cables came in the bag. It was very nice. The only thing it didn't have was the outer retail box. It was in Corsair's brown box. Beyond that, frankly, it looks brand new. You don't need 1200 watts and you don't have to buy an 80 plus platinum power supply. So I actually don't recommend that power supply unless you can get one refurbished. For 170, it's a deal. For 310, it's nuts. What would I buy? For this system, if I was buying new, an 850 watt gold 80 plus power supply, either from Corsair or EVGA is what I would buy. And I will link to two of those, one from Corsair and one from EVGA in the description below. They're great power supplies. They can be found for around $120 or so. They will provide you with what's called modular connections where you only have to use the cables you need. There's no cables in this. You only plug in that which you need, freeing up cable clutter, and then you can just add and remove cables as you go. It even comes, this one does anyway, with a very nice Velcro bag to store your extra cables in a safe place for the future when you need them. I wouldn't go lower than 850. Now this system here as it stands actually doesn't need 850. I could put a 600 watt power supply in here and it would actually run fine as it stands. But if you're putting this much money into this level of computer, at least get the 850 because it gives you the option of, for example, adding a second video card and doing SLI or Crossfire down the future. It gives you the option of adding more hard drives, more storage, and it just gives you some extra flexibility, and it runs the power supply at a more middle level rather than running it right near the top. So that's why that's there, but I actually recommend about an 850. If you want to buy a 1000 watt, you can, but you're starting to get into the 150, 160 range. It's not necessary. Add up the wattage of the components. This is a max 140 watt CPU. The graphics card pulls maybe, say, let's be really generous and say 220. The SSDs don't draw much, the hard drives don't draw much. We're looking at 450. With overclocking, maybe 500 watts. A 600 watt would run this. Do an 850. It's not that much more money, and for this level of machine, you get nice modular components, you get a little bit better grade power supply. Get an 850 is what I would recommend. I mentioned the case. I love this case. I cannot say enough about this case. What other cases would I buy? The Corsair Obsidian 750D is not a new case. Both of my i7s at home are built in this case. It's been around for a number of years, but it works. There's no need to change what already works. Everything from the power supply being mounted on the bottom, there is, and I'm not going to do a full look at it because I've done an unboxing video of that. There is a dust screen and dust filter for the power supply air intake on the bottom. It comes with 3 140 millimeter silent fans. Those by themselves, that's $30-ish worth of fans. 2 in the front, 1 in the back. There is a dust filter in the front as well. This is magnetic and just pops straight off. There is a dust filter there you can take out and blow out. You've got 2 USB 3 ports and 2 USB 2 ports on the front. You've got a nice big, very clear side window. It comes with 6 hard drive trays that are toolless for hard drives that also have the mounts for 2.5-inch drives. On the back of the case, it's got room for 4 2.5-inch SSDs, and I'll be using all 4 of those slots. You've got 3 5.25-inch drive bays, very clean design. You've got grommets inside, you've got cable management tools. There is room up top for not only a 280 millimeter radiator, but there's also room for another 140 millimeter fan. It's a great case. For $130 for a full tower, this is the one I'd buy. If you don't want to spend this much money, you can, for about $70 to $75, get some really good mid-tower cases. Yes, you can put this level equipment into a mid-tower. I have more drives than are normal. I need a full tower. You could do, for example, the Cooler Master Box 5 for about $70. Great case. In fact, that case, my first experience with it was with the $720 CyberPower PC pre-built gaming computer that I've previously reviewed extensively on this channel. I actually really like that case. It's very nice. It's not big enough for all of the drives I have here. But if you only plan to put in a few drives, if you don't plan to do quite as an extreme build, that case is $50 less, and it's a very nice case. Now, if you're going with that case, the top of it does not have room for a 280 millimeter cooler, but it does have room for a 140 millimeter cooler. So you could save a few dollars by going with the H90 or H80, which is the thicker version of the 120, if you wanted to go with a mid-tower case. Now, there are other brands of case besides Corsair and Cooler Master, but I have very limited experience with other brands, so I don't want to talk about them too much. But what I will say, look at the reviews on Newegg and Amazon of any case you're looking at. Don't just look at the star rating. Read through some of the reviews, because I don't want to say the devil's in the details, but it's in the details. How is cable management? How is drive installation? What's it like living with a case? If you read through the reviews on both Newegg and Amazon of any case you're thinking of, if by chance you don't want this case, cases are a very personal choice. Read through the reviews and look for people who have updated the reviews and go, you know, after 6 months, here's my thoughts. I've owned this for 3 months now. I've tried upgrading in this case. Here's my thoughts. That will give you, honestly, a better idea of that case than anything else. Any unboxing and reviews you find, if you go, for example, to YouTube or to websites and you look up a review of a case that a reviewer, such as myself, has simply unboxed, looked at, talked about, taken pictures of, how much experience do they have with that case? Have they built it and lived with it? I'm giving you my glowing opinion of this case because I've had one for 3 years. It's gone through 3 graphics cards upgrades. It's gone through multiple hard drive and SSD installations. I've lived with it. Not only did I like it, but a year ago, actually a year and a half ago now, boy, time flies. A year and a half ago, when I built my i7 4790K machine, I bought another one. And a year and a half later today, building this, I bought a third. If that's not a ringing endorsement, I don't know what is. So, I recommend you look at people who have used it and lived with it, any case, not just this one, any case, rather than just they opened it, they talked about it for an hour, and then they put it back in the box. Enough about the case. RAM. RAM's fun. Why do I have 32 gigs of RAM? My current machine actually has 32 gigs of RAM. I use it. There have been numerous times while I have Adobe Premiere Pro open and Adobe Photoshop open, and all the stuff I have in the task tray running in the background on my machine, and a game open. I've got 3 monitors on my main machine at home, and I'll often have Adobe Premiere Pro on the main screen, alternating with Photoshop. I'll have my web browser on my left screen, which for you watching this is over here, but for me, it's my left screen. And then on the right screen, I might open up World of Warships and play a game of World of Warships in a window, and then go back to work. What can I say? I multitask. Using 22, 24, even 26 gigs of RAM is not uncommon for me. It didn't used to be. It was the inclusion of Adobe Premiere Pro and Adobe Photoshop that really kicked it above 20 gigabytes. Now you might ask, why don't I have 64? It's kind of expensive at the moment. 3,000 megahertz of 64 gigs of RAM is $350 at the moment to get one kit of it. This is $170. So that's a lot of extra money to spend for 64 gigs of RAM that I don't need at the moment. Now this is 4 memory modules. This motherboard has 8 memory slots. I can buy this now, and in the future, if and or when I need 64 gigs, I can buy another one and stick it in here and have 64 gigs. Now this motherboard supports 128. I can't envision a time I will ever need 128 gigs. I just don't. 128 gigs is when you're running 10 virtual machines, or you're running simulations, or you've got a lot of stuff loaded that is not normal desktop stuff. If you need 128 gigs of RAM, you might want to be on the Xenon platform, because that's a bit crazy. I might very well end up with 64 at some point. This gives me the option of going to 64 while I start off with 32. Would I build an X99 system today with a 6-core processor and put 16 gigs of RAM in? No, I wouldn't. If you are multitasking or doing enough stuff that you need an i7, the 32 helps. Even if in Task Manager it only says you're using 16 gigs, there's nothing left over for Windows to use as a cache, as a drive cache. There's nothing for Windows to do internal maintenance work with, and you run the risk of Windows going to compressed memory. Windows has the ability to compress your RAM to avoid going to swap file. Compressing your RAM slows your system down. It's $170 right now, at least at the day I filmed this video, for 32 gigs of 3,000 megahertz RAM. You'll save $80 by going with 16. How much does this cost? $80? Really? No, don't. 32 gigs. If you're going with X99, go with 32 gigs of RAM. Should you go to 64? Maybe. That's a personal choice. Even with everything I do, I'm not at all convinced that I need 64 gigs, but we'll see. Now I know what you're thinking. Why 3,000 megahertz RAM doesn't make a difference? Normally, no, it doesn't. If you're building a gaming rig, if you're building a general Windows desktop computer, don't waste your money. 2,400 megahertz RAM is all you need. There's no need for 3,000, 3,200 or faster RAM. In games, it doesn't make a difference. In general Windows performance, it doesn't make a difference. Where it does make a difference is 3D animation and video rendering. And virtual machines. It would make a difference in virtual machines. It makes a difference in scientific database applications and weird stuff like that. But in normal desktop stuff, it doesn't make a difference. So on a Z170 board, for example, if you do like an i5 6600K, it's unnecessary. Now, RAM prices drop over time. So in the future, if you're watching this video 6 months from here, a year from now, and this isn't all horribly obsolete and out of date by then anyway, faster RAM will become less expensive. And that happened with DDR2, that happened with DDR3, it will happen with DDR4. The base clock speed of DDR4 is 2133 right now, although 2400 is basically the same price. At some point in the future, 3000 and 3200 will become the same price and there'll be no difference, and that'll become the new standard. In fact, within DDR4's lifetime, we may well see DDR4 4000 become reasonable and normal. But that might be 3 or 4 years from now, and that'll be on the next several generations of chipsets, not even on what we're looking at today. But that's why that's there. Brands, this is G.Skill. Why? I don't know. I like the look of it. It was fine. G.Skill, Corsair, Crucial, Kingston, doesn't make any difference to me. They're all about the same. Pick the one you like the color of, the one that's cheap and in stock at the time that you're buying. It really doesn't matter so long as it's a name brand. Personally, my recommendation, G.Skill, Corsair, Kingston, and Crucial. Actually, I think those are the only 4 brands I've bought in a while, and they're probably the only 4 brands I'm going to buy. Let me get the video card out of the way first before we talk about the storage. If you're building this kind of machine and you plan to play games, there's the GTX 1080, and then there's the GTX 1080, and then there's the GTX 1080. You shouldn't put anything else in here. Not the 1070, not the RX 480. If you plan to play games and you're building a multi-$1,000 machine, 1080. Now, when I am filming this video, Vega has not been released. What is that? RX 490. It's the upcoming high-end graphics card from AMD. We don't know what it's going to perform or what it's going to cost. If you're watching this video later in 2016 or early in 2017, and your first question is, but you didn't mention RX 490. Well, yes, because when I filmed this, it didn't exist. Or if you're watching this in December and GTX 1080 Ti has been released, and you say, why are you talking about the 1080 when the Ti is out? I filmed this in September of 2016. It didn't exist. There are rumors of a Ti coming. We'll see. They're rumors. What about Titan X? No, terrible deal. It's 40% faster than this card for double the price. It's just unnecessary. Wait for the Ti, because the Ti, frankly, will probably be 30% faster for the same price, and they'll probably drop this down to about 500, and like they did with the 900 series. So if you're going to build a machine of this caliber, GTX 1080, at least at the moment, a top-of-the-line mainstream card in the $600 price range is what's appropriate here. Now, what if you're not gaming? Hang on, you might be saying, but I don't care. All right. GTX 1060 is what I would put in here. If you prefer AMD for whatever reason, RX 470 is what I would put in here. Not a 480, a 470. RX 480 is about 10% faster than a 470 for about 20% more money. It's not really a value. I would go with a 470 based on prices as they exist today if you prefer AMD. I personally prefer NVIDIA, so I would go with a GTX 1060. And in fact, if you only need a video card because you need something with CUDA cores to accelerate After Effects, you could probably go with a 1060 3GB card for $200 rather than the 1066 GB card for $260. And I would do an EVGA card because I'm partial to EVGA because I own a bunch of them and I like them, but if you prefer something else, it doesn't matter. They're all pretty much the same. The only reason to have a video card in a machine of this level, besides the fact that you have to because there's no integrated GPU, is if you're doing 3D animation or video rendering, a graphics card can speed it up. However, a faster graphics card often doesn't make a big difference. Note, exception. If you are using a specialty 3D rendering program that outputs all of its 3D render work to your video card, if you've got something that you know puts out to the video card, well then I shouldn't need to tell you to get the best video card you can. Adobe Premiere Pro, which is what I use to edit these 4K videos, is entirely CPU bound. The graphics card doesn't make a difference. On my machine at home, I did a test, and yes, I actually did this. On the i7 4790K Haswell refresh, it currently has an EVGA GeForce GTX 1070 in it. I took the 1070 out and I put an old GTX 960, not a 970, a 960 2GB card in its place. I then rendered a short video, and then I rendered the same video on the 1070. No, I didn't film it. I probably should have, but I didn't. No difference. There was no difference in render time between a GTX 1070 and a GTX 960 on my i7 4790K. So if you're just rendering videos in Adobe Premiere Pro, in my case, MP4 container, H269, there's no difference. So why a 1080? Because I'm going to play Grand Theft Auto 5 on this at 4K. That's why. Okay, video card out of the way. Oh, should you put two of them in? Maybe. That's a personal choice. I'm not a big fan of SLI. I am going to test SLI on this. There will be an upcoming video where I do SLI comparisons because people are going to ask for it, and people are going to say, man, you're spending all this money, you might as well do it. I will do some SLI testing. I'm not a fan of SLI. And yes, I've used it, and I've used Crossfire. But background note, my machine at home, before it had a GTX 980 Ti in it, it actually had a faster card. I had a R9 295X2 in there, the dual Hawaii card. The first one that was factory liquid cooling that was ridiculously expensive. We won't get into that. Although I sold it for a decent price back during the whole render thing, the whole Bitcoin farming and Dogecoin farming and whatever that stuff is. I've never really done that stuff, but I know that for a while prices spiked a year and a half ago because of that. So I sold it and bought an NVIDIA card. That card, the R9 295X2, is faster than a single 980 Ti. And in fact, it might even be faster than this card, or at least it's really close. But it's Crossfire. In order to get that performance, you have to be using Crossfire. In games that fully support it, it works great now. It didn't back then because of micro stutter and frame pacing issues, which have to some extent been fixed now. A year and a half ago, there were some major issues with Crossfire on AMD cards with frame pacing and micro stutter, but they've fixed most of that now. It's fine. What happens when you play a game that doesn't support it or doesn't support it well? There's still games coming out today that don't support it very well. It sounds great when it works, until it doesn't. There are even games that you have to disable it or they crash. Go figure. So I'm not a big fan of it, but I'll test it. Okay, enough of the graphics card. On to storage. I have got a lot of storage in the system. Most people don't need all this. This is overkill for even above average people. Some of this is in here because I have a YouTube channel. Some of this is in here because I personally need it. First things first. Samsung 950 Pro NVMe SSD. This is expensive. This is $320 for 512 gigs of space. By comparison, this is an 850 EVO that's one terabyte, and it's $310. So 1 terabyte of an 850 EVO is less expensive than a 950 Pro. If you want to spend $300 on an SSD, most of you should buy the 850 EVO. Yes, this is faster. I probably would not have bought this if I didn't have a YouTube channel. There's value in this because I will get benchmarks and reviews out of it, and I can talk about it, and it generates videos for me. But beyond that, I'm not jumping up and down about it. Now, having said that, disclaimer, this is inside a box. I haven't used it yet. Let me see if my opinion changes once it gets put in there, which is, again, I can talk about it, and I just did, but I haven't used it yet. My opinion is subject to change once this is up and running, and I might go, holy crap, this is the most amazing thing ever. I would not have personally bought that without this. So, the 850 EVO. I have 2 of these in 2 different machines at home. I love the 850 EVO. I've talked about it. I did a video where I did an SSD overview and comparison. I can speak from personal experience. This is by far the best basic SSD on the market, the 2.5-inch serial ATA SSD on the market. I have an ADATA installed in a machine that I've used. I've got the SanDisk Ultra 2s. For those of you curious, if you've watched all my game performance videos, I have 2 of those under this desk in an external enclosure that all of the games that I do in my game performance videos are installed in. Yes, I have $450 of SSDs under this desk for all the games I run game performance videos on. I started out with an 8 terabyte Western Digital hard drive, the MyBook, which I've also reviewed on this channel. I review everything, what can I say? That's a $250 drive, and it's 8 terabytes. That's $450, and it's 2 terabytes, essentially, a little under 2 terabytes. Here's the problem. I would set up a machine or a laptop. I would turn everything on. It would have been a week since I'd filmed game performance videos. I would plug in the external Western Digital MyBook drive, which hadn't been plugged in and hadn't been updating. I would log into Steam, and 6 games would need a patch. And it would take 3 hours to patch them. Because the Western Digital MyBook is a 5400 RPM drive, I actually got to the point to where when I was ready to film game videos, the night before when I left the office, I would actually plug it into a machine, launch Steam, and let it run overnight. It was that bad. Because it's a hard drive, and patching games, some games are quick to patch, and some games would take an hour or two for one game. It was ridiculous. Now you might say, wait a minute, why would I want a hard drive, or what's wrong? Okay, hang on. If again, I'm running this on multiple machines, it's not plugged in all the time. I might go a week or more without filming game performance videos. You, with Steam installed on your computer that's turned on every day or is left on overnight, patches at convenient times and runs in the background. When I'm ready to film game performance videos, I'm set up here, I've got my lights on, my camera on, I turn the computer on. I'm here for only one purpose, to film a video. If I open Steam and it's got 3 hours of patches, now what do I do? The SSDs patch in no time flat. The performance difference of SSDs in random reads and writes, it's not the transfer rate, it's random performance. I can turn it on and 15, 20 minutes and it'll patch 4 or 5 games, no big deal. So it's expensive, but at some point my time and my sanity have value. So I've used those. I've also used Crucial BX200s. I've used PNY drives. I have an SSD installed in everything I own. I don't use computers without an SSD. It's an unacceptable experience. Once you've gone SSD, if you have any desire to have your computer be quick, you will never go back to a hard drive. So I won't use a hard drive anymore. Even my $350 build has an SSD in it. In fact, many people in the comment section beneath my $350 build said, why'd you put an SSD in? At this price, you need a hard drive, you need space, games are too big. To which my response is, fine, put a hard drive in. Or add the $50 to add a drive. But you have to remember, that machine that I built, I had to install Windows on, and then run Windows updates, and then run game performance videos on. I will not do it on a hard drive. I just won't. It is unacceptable in 2016. I just won't. When I did the $720 CyberPower PC, which is a great machine, rest assured, the very first thing I did was get an SSD in there. Now, I did do the first boot and Windows Update, and I did the Windows Performance Review on the hard drive because I have to, because that's your experience out of the box. But I filmed both. I filmed the SSD Performance Review separate. I did it before and after. All the game performance videos on that were all filmed when the SSD was in there. So, and there's a reset too, because actually I filmed all the game performance videos first, and then I did that video, so I actually wiped it and cloned it twice. The second one I didn't film because that would be silly. All of these other SSDs are fine. They don't hold a candle to the 850 EVO. I'm rambling, I apologize. This is a vlog, what can I say? If you're still watching, you either like the sound of my voice or you like what I have to say. If not, you've already gone on to the next video. The 850 the 850 EVO really is that good. You can get a 960 gig SSD for about $200 these days. In fact, I probably paid $200 for this. I wait for deals and I buy these and I stick them on the shelf for when I need them. This particular drive is currently, the Ultra 2 is about $220, $230 on Amazon. There was a daily deal back in August for, it was either $189 or $199 for these, and I picked up 2 of them, which is actually the 2 sitting under the desk, so I didn't actually pay $450, I paid a little under $400 for them. There's a reason my channel is called Tech Deals. I wait for sales, I add items to my cart. In Amazon, if you add items to your shopping cart and then you click Save for Later, you'll get notified for price changes, or add them to your wish list. And this way, when they have a sale or a price discount, then you buy it. So you might be asking, holy smokes, what's all this doing here? Well, let me explain my machine first. I play games, I edit videos, and I do other work-related stuff. This is not my full-time profession. I have a job and a business outside of YouTube. So basically I work all the time. It's why sometimes you see, if you look at some of the videos I film, for example, and you look at the time on the monitor, those times are accurate. In fact, I am filming this video after midnight. So I am burning the midnight oil to get this done. What can I say? I had to look over at the clock on the wall because I don't have a monitor. This is going to be where all my games are installed. Because for games, the performance of the 850 EVO is worth it. The time is worth it. This is where you should install games. Now, I edit videos, and I currently do those on a hard drive, and I'm not going to do that anymore. Because while videos are largely, you think of videos as playback and even copying large files at sequential transfer rate. It is. And SSDs have a better sequential transfer rate than hard drives, but their cost is so high, that's not the reason to do it. When editing videos and rendering videos, random performance does matter. So, one of these two 960s is going to become my video drive, where I put my videos, I do my edits, I do my renders before I move them off to hard drives. I'm going to dedicate one of these just to that. Now, a terabyte of SSD might sound like a lot, but hang on. I film my YouTube videos at 100 megabits per second, which is 12 something megabytes per second, at 4K at 30 frames a second. I briefly dabbled in 60 frame per second video, but I had a problem with the camera, and I'm back to 30 because this is a better camera, or hopefully you think so. I had a couple of fuzzy images. I had some videos with tears in the middle. I will go back to 60 frames a second at some point in the future, but there's no reasonably priced camera I'm happy with. I tried 2 different cameras from Amazon. They both had problems. I sent them back. Thanks, Amazon, for great customer service. So, when I record these videos, it's onto a 256 gigabyte SD card. Not very often, but occasionally, I'll actually fill up more than one card in a whole day of filming. When I do game performance videos, for example, I film them back to back to back, which is probably why I look more enthusiastic in some of them than others. The CyberPower PC, the $720 machine, I filmed most of those videos back in August. I filmed some in September and some in August. They're all scheduled to publish all the way through the month of September, and I have a few of them scheduled to publish in October. They've all been filmed. I have other videos I've also filmed on the HP laptop and some upcoming videos on the Dell Inspiron laptop that have been filmed and you haven't seen yet. In fact, I intend to publish this fairly quickly because I want to get this build done because I want to move on with it. I don't publish in the order I film, and I try to have 2 to 3 weeks of videos done in advance. I want to take a vacation at some point. I need a vacation. So I may have 2 or 3 SD cards worth of videos, and I'll sit down and render them on the weekend when I have free time. 2 or 3 SD cards is 500 to 700 gigabytes worth of videos. 960 gigs of SSD is not overkill. That is not a normal situation. You probably don't need all that. This is a special situation for me. Now, why is this an Ultra 2 and that's an ADATA? It's what was sitting on the shelf and it's something to try. The other benefit, again, YouTube channel. I'm going to have 5 different SSDs in this machine when I'm done. Benchmark time, rest assured there will be an SSD shootout with live performance testing of these SSDs once this is expensive. I'm going to get my money's worth out of this machine with videos. This is a Crucial MX300. This is a new drive just released. I haven't used it yet. This will be my first MX300 that I'll have installed. This is the 750 gigabyte size. Why 750 instead of 1 terabyte? Daily deal. I got this cheap. I won't even tell you because it doesn't matter and you won't be able to replace that deal, and I don't want to make you sad when you see what it costs today. I got this for a crazy price. That's why it's 750. Otherwise, I'd buy the 1 terabyte. I got a good price on that. I will report in the future on how it works. I've never installed one. I've used all these. Well, I haven't used that, but I've used ADATA. I've used the Ultra 2. I have 2 of the 850 EVOs. They're spectacular. I'm expecting the MX300 to be better than the Ultra 2 and the ADATA, but not as good as the 850 EVO. We'll see if that turns out to be true. One of these is going to be a scratch video folder for videos. The other one is going to be for other business data, for other work-related data that has nothing to do with YouTube, and I'll leave it at that. What's the 750 going to be for? Partly because I got a really good deal on it, and partly because you never know when you need a little bit of extra space for an extra game or two, or for moving files around. I have a network in my house. I'm often moving files from machine to machine. It never hurts to have some extra space. Hard drives. You cannot do video work without having hard drives. I have got, let me move this so you can see them, 4. These are Seagate 8 terabyte archive drives. They're the cheap ones that are fast to read but slow to write. At least slow once they get past their high-speed cache portion. If you just want to write 2 or 3 gigabytes of files, these are really, really fast. If you want to write 100 gigs of files, it will write at like 100 to 120. I haven't used one yet, but from what I've read in benchmarks, yes, I will do benchmarks on this, don't worry. This will write at 100 to 120 gigabytes per second for the first 10 gigs or so. And then it slows down to like 30 gigs. This is meant for long-term storage. These drives can currently be had on Amazon for $200 for 8 terabytes. Note, that's an external drive. If you want to put it in your machine, you'll have to chuck it or shuck it, depending on how you want to say it, by taking it out of its enclosure, which probably voids the warranty. Probably. I don't know for sure, but it probably does. Ironically, the internal version of these on Amazon right now is running $240. I would not buy those for $240. $210, $220, okay, buy the internal, get the warranty and the peace of mind. Otherwise, buy the external version for $199, which is what they're currently running, and just rip them out of the enclosure, especially if you're buying several of them. The savings adds up. That's a 20% discount. That's a personal choice. Now, the problem with paying $240 for those is the full-fledged non-archive version of the 8 terabyte drives isn't much more. I've seen them on sale in the $280-ish range. Normal retail is about $300. Those drives are full performance all the time, really, really fast, but they cost a bit more. I will never be running anything off these drives. These 4 drives will be installed in here and set up as a Windows storage spaces. What storage spaces? Storage spaces is an interesting subject, and there will be a whole video on it. But in essence, it gives you more flexibility of drives than the older way of partitioning and managing drives in Windows does. This motherboard has RAID built into it, Intel's RAID. It's software RAID, not hardware, so the performance it's fine for RAID 0 and RAID 1. It does do RAID 5. But you're limited in your array options. You can't add and remove drives, rebuild times. You're married to the Intel RAID chip. You can't just plug the drives into any port. There's issues with using hardware RAID, especially when it's not real hardware RAID. A real hardware RAID card is going to run you $400 or $500. And that actually has a processor and a chip, and it's fast, and that's a different beast. The RAID that's built into motherboards is just software RAID. Storage spaces is an interesting thing. Read speed is great. Read speed is awesome. Write speed is great for the first few gigabytes, and then just like the archive drives, it falls off a cliff to about 30 to 40 megabytes per second. I use storage spaces at home. I do have experience with this, and yes, I've tested it. I've disconnected drives. I've played around with it to make sure it's reliable. I'm happy with it. My 4 terabyte drives in my machine at home are set up as a storage space. You can set them up as parity, RAID 5. There's 32 gigabytes of space here. It will be set up as 24 gigabytes, roughly, of used. It'll actually show up as about 21 or 22 in Windows because of the way they measure. But it'll show up as 24 gigabytes of usable space. If one of those 4 drives fails, I don't lose any data. In fact, you can just go unplug one of them and it will continue to work. When you replace that drive, let's say a drive fails, when you replace it, it will then rebuild the array in the background. It provides security against hard drive failure. Please note, RAID is not backup. You have no extra copies of your data. A virus, ransomware, user error, fire, lightning, theft will still destroy your data. RAID is not backup. But for me, my single biggest risk is a hard drive failure. The data I have, both my YouTube videos and my other work-related files, are honestly worth more than this whole computer is. So using one of these drives as a parity drive means that if one drive fails, I don't lose any data. but I also have online backup. I've done another video about backup. I use Backblaze Online Backup. There is a link in the very bottom of the video description to my Backblaze referral link, and if you want to try it out, you get a couple of weeks of free service, no credit card required to try. It is unlimited online backup for $5 a month. I've been using Backblaze for 2 years. I cannot say enough good stuff about them as a company or a product. I can shoot 200 gigabytes worth of files. I can take the memory card home, plug it into my computer, copy the files over to my drives. By the time I wake up the next morning, it's all backed up. Very, very quick. I have used Carbonite and I've used CrashPlan. I don't recommend either one of them anymore because they're slow. And when you get a larger and larger amount of data to back up, they start slowing down. Carbonite admits they throttle. CrashPlan claims they don't. I don't want to call anybody a liar, but they do. So I won't use them anymore. Backblaze doesn't, and they back up very, very quickly. I often get more than 100 megabits per second upload speed to Backblaze. That's really, really good. Not always. It sometimes fluctuates when they're processing on files, but I have sometimes plugged it in, and in 4 to 8 hours, it's all backed up. So I love it. Restoring data, now you might say, wait, well, how are you going to get your data back? Well, first of all, I don't need most of it back very quickly. Most of it, I could get it in a month and it wouldn't matter. Critical files, I would download immediately. Backblaze will FedEx you for $130 a hard drive to restore your data. But once you've restored your data off that hard drive, send the drive back, they give you a refund for the $130. They don't want your money, they just want their external drive back. It's a great service. So if you need your data back and you need terabytes and terabytes of data back, they will FedEx you your data, copy it off, return the drives within 30 days, they will refund your money. What more could you want? That's great service. I have over 17, actually now I've got over 18 terabytes of data backed up with them. I can't complain. It's a great, great service. I'm not probably a normal user in that respect, and they're probably thrilled to have me as a customer for $5 a month. Actually, $4 a month because I've prepaid for 2 years, and so I'm paying $3.95 a month. So my data is protected from a hard drive failure through, once I've done my videos and I've rendered everything and worked, I put it on my storage space drive. It's protected from a drive failure locally by storage spaces, and then from fire, theft, lightning, etc. by Backblaze Online Backup. Furthermore, the 8 terabyte hard drive I mentioned earlier, the external drive, as well as the 16 terabyte external Western Digital MyBook Duo, I've also reviewed that, that's in my channel. Those 2 external drives are also local backup that I connect to my machine once a week. The Western Digital MyBook Duo comes with good enough backup software that it backs up my local files, and then I disconnect them and put those somewhere else. I've lost data before. I will never ever lose data again. Data loss sucks. There's 2 kinds of people in the world. People who have lost data and people who haven't learned to back up yet. So my data is more valuable than my computer, so I make sure that I have it. That's what those are for. This is also why not everybody needs to spend this much money. Most people don't need 32 terabytes of hard drives and 5 SSDs. But for my particular use case, for what I'll do with this machine, it makes sense. Now, I mentioned before that I often have 15 things running in the task tray. Putting aside Steam, Origin, Good Old Games, Battle.net, Uplay, Wargaming.net's update. I'm trying to think of everything that's down there. Backblaze, CrashPlan that I have 9 months left on my subscription. Although I will not be reinstalling it on this machine. I bought the 4-year plan 3 years ago with CrashPlan. It's still on my machine. It's got like 6 months left to back up. It is the slowest thing in the world. I'm not saying they're bad, but they're slow. So when I set this up, I will not be moving that over because I don't even want to infest the machine with their software because it's slow as molasses. But I do have both Backblaze and CrashPlan running. OneDrive, that's it. I've got OneDrive, and I've got all my important documents synced with OneDrive. Samsung's Magician software is running. Crucial Storage Executive is running because I've got an M500 SSD in that machine. And there's probably 4 or 5 other things I'm not even thinking of. All that's running in the task tray. Plus I usually have Microsoft Office, usually both Word and Excel open, Adobe Premiere Pro and Adobe Photoshop, usually 20 web browser tabs, and then I want to open a game. 6-core processor, quad channel, 3000 megahertz RAM, multiple SSDs, because I won't install everything. Some programs, Adobe, Office, etc., will be installed on the NVMe drive. But with games installed on the 850 EVO, updates to my games, when Steam wants to run updates, when Origin wants to download a Battlefield 1 update, for example, the reading and writing does not compete with the main drive. If you're a heavy multitasker, you have a lot of stuff running in the background. Having some of your programs on one drive and some on another will help your system. I discovered this when I installed a second SSD in my computer. I've got a Crucial M500 in there, and I've split my programs between them because if something is updating, even though SSDs are fast, it still monopolizes the drive's time. So it helps to spread your programs around, and that's kind of why I have all this, because I've got various things updating, and so this way the workload is spread across various drives, various connections, and so on and so forth. Has this been informative as to the decision-making process? Now, this has been a really long video, I know. In fact, I'm even tired just talking this long straight. I hope this has been helpful. I don't expect anyone to build this as it sits exactly. That would be silly. What I want you to do is to take my thought process, my behind-the-scenes thinking that came to the conclusion of everything that's sitting here, and use it to apply it to your own situation. Does this part or that part, do you need this much RAM? Do you need the liquid cooler? What kind of case do you want? These are personal decisions, and what works for you is going to be different than what works for me and what works for other people. I know, there was one other thing I was going to mention. I don't think I mentioned this at the beginning of the video. If I did, it's because I forgot because it's such a long video. This is a less than $10 cable that on one end plugs into your motherboard because there are 2 plugs in here for USB 3.0 ports. One of these will be used for the front of the case for those. The other will be used for this. This provides 2 more USB 3 ports for the back of the system. In the next video, I will show this being installed. When it's overhead, I'll show you how this goes in. But basically, that gives me 2 more ports. Beyond that, I think I'll end this video here and simply say this. Questions and comments and thoughts, by all means. If you've watched this far, 2 thumbs up to you, seriously. But I wanted to try something longer and explanatory, and hopefully this has been helpful. Leave your comments and questions below. Like the video if you like it. Don't if you don't. Remember to subscribe to my channel for notifications and updates to future upcoming videos. It doesn't cost anything, so click the big red button now. If you've already subscribed, thank you. Check out my video description below. Not only will it have links to all the other videos that will be on this machine, there will be links to both Amazon and Newegg for all these products, as well as to some other unboxing videos. I've done an unboxing on the video card, on the motherboard. Check out the prices in Amazon and Newegg. By all means, buy it where it makes most sense for you. There's also links at the very bottom of the video to the international pages on Amazon. If you're outside the United States, if you're in Europe or Canada, by all means, click those. I would certainly appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.